try to reach the constituents where they want to have us. So we do all kinds of we do teletown halls, we do online town halls. Last week I did a Medicaid listening session where people talked about their stories. And we do live town halls. I think the maximum number of people we ever had in a live town hall before this was 400. So good for you for showing up. And now today we've decided technology, and I have a motto, which is technology is our friend. I usually say that when I can't bring up an app on my phone. And so if you, I'll tell you again, Joe told you, but if you need to know how to ask questions, just scan the QR code to access the platform, and you can enter your question there. And then if there's other questions that you like, you can put a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I know you'll be shocked to hear we cannot answer every question you have in 1 hour. However, we are going to try to get to as many, so if there's somebody who's asking the same question in your mind, if you give a thumbs up, that puts it to the top of the queue. And also, if you are not good with technology, you can write it on a piece of paper and you can give it to one of my staff members. One thing that's always difficult for me in these situations, but I feel like I need to tell you, this is an official event of the 1st Congressional District, and so I cannot discuss campaign issues. But I can surely discuss what's going on in this country right now, and I intend to do just like that. So, anyway, if I say, well, I can't talk about that because it's a campaign issue, that's actually the law, and unlike some people we know, I believe in following the law. When I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, you know, everybody has been it's been about 70 days. Feels like it's been about 70 years, doesn't it? And I've been trying to think about how is it I address everything that's been happening. And because people say, what are you doing? And you know, every day I'm doing a lot, which I'll talk about. But there's really three things that are happening right now to fight back against the turbulence that we're seeing with the Trump administration. And it's the 3 C's: courts, Congress, and the courage of our citizens. So let me talk about what we're doing. The first, and this is one reason why I invited Attorney General Weiser to come, because he's going to give us an update in just a minute about these cases. Everything to closing the Department of Education, everything to laying off employees at the VA or making people go in person to apply for or change their Social Security benefits. All of that is illegal. And the reason it's illegal is because, think back to the mists of time, even before high school, Article 1 of the Constitution. Article 1 of the Constitution is Congress. And Congress has the authority to authorize these agencies and to fund these agencies. And the executive branch, that being Donald Trump and his band of merry cabinet members, they have the ability to carry that out. So all this stuff they've been doing is illegal. Now, Congress is not allowed to bring, and so let me just tell you, as of March 31st, there have been 152 cases with 53 rulings that have at least temporarily halted what Donald Trump has been doing. And Phil's going to talk about that in a minute. Every day, there are new court cases filed because there's new illegal activity. So fortunately, our really visionary framers in this country realized that we had to have a system of checks and balances, and so far, you know, barely, but so far it's happening. And Congress, here's something else many people don't know, Congress is not allowed to bring lawsuits against the president itself, but we can file briefs in support of what others do called amicus briefs. I have been appointed in Congress to the litigation task force in the House because I'm a trained lawyer, and I'm working with my colleagues on that task force, Jamie Raskin, Jonah Goose, a bunch of people. We're working together to make sure that all the lawsuits are being filed by people who have the appropriate legal standing to do it. And then we're supporting them with our amicus briefs and with Congress. Just yesterday, as a matter of fact, I filed an amicus brief in the American Foreign Service Association et al. Versus Trump et al., which is the case that is designed to stop Trump's illegal attempt to dismantle USAID. We also filed an amicus brief in defense of American consumers and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau in the case of NTEU versus CPFE acting director, and on and on. One of the things, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, but I am one of the experts in Congress, maybe the expert in the House, on biomedical research and drug and device approval at the FDA. Some of you know that already. I was sickened when they tried to do that executive order, cutting 20% of the employees at HHS and cutting all of those grants. And cutting and delaying all the grants that they get out at Anschutz Medical Center, that they get all around the world, and that they do in Bethesda, because this is the life-saving cures and disease prevention that is the gold standard in the world. And I spent 3 or 4 days frantically calling everybody I know, making sure a lawsuit was going to be filed on that, because guess what? It's illegal. And lo, guess who filed a lawsuit on it? Go Weiser. So, now I'm going to be taking the lead on working on the amicus brief to make sure that our scientists are restored to their jobs and that our funding is I'll just close my first C by saying that we are 3 equal branches of government. And P.S., Donald Trump, the executive branch is not ruled by a king. Number 2, Congress. Beyond the courts, and as well as supporting our friends with amicus briefs, we're fighting back in Congress through our committees and calling out our Republican colleagues who, as you might remember, have a thin majority in the House and the Senate for ceding our constitutional authority to the administration. We have introduced numerous bills to combat the administration's evisceration of the federal government. That includes my bill, the Doge-Pound Act, to prevent unlawful access to by Doge to sensitive healthcare data. We also introduced bills to prohibit unlawful access to the Treasury Department payment systems, prohibit the dismantling of the Department of Education, reinstate federal employees who were unjustly fired by the Trump administration, and billionaire Elon Musk Doge initiative that targeted federal workers, to reinstate veterans who have been removed or dismissed from federal employment without cause. The other thing we are doing, while we're in the minority, we can't make them bring up a bill for a vote, but we can file what's called a discharge petition, and if we can get enough people to sign that petition, 218 to be precise, that bill will be forced to come on the floor. And if those Republicans won't sign the discharge petition, we're going to call them out. And there's some of them right there in the state of Colorado. So, anyway, I'm concerned because in Congress already, like you saw in the House, every single House Democrat voted against their budget, which was, their budget is insane. And the tax cuts that they want to do are $4.2 trillion. They told us that, the Republicans told us that they're going to do a tax cut of $4.2 trillion, primarily for billionaires like Elon Musk and corporations, not for regular people. Then they told us $2 trillion has to be offset. Now what that means is they say we have to find cuts to finance this $2 trillion in tax cuts. And they told my committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, you might have read this in the press, that we had to cut $880 billion to help them fund their tax cuts. Well, guess what is, and some of you might know this, but I am now the senior Democrat on the Health Subcommittee in Energy and Commerce. So I'm kind of the leader on all of the healthcare issues. And guess what the amount of Medicaid is for the next 10 years? Coincidentally, $880 billion. So when we pointed this out, they said, oh, did you see anywhere in this that said we're going to cut Medicaid? But the truth is, there's nothing else in the Energy and Commerce jurisdiction that comes anywhere close to $880 billion. So we've been calling them out on this because the one thing we need in this country is health care for all Americans. Before we can get Medicare for all, we have to make sure we have robust Medicaid for everybody who deserves it. And so what I have been doing and what I'm going to be doing as this bill works its way through the House, I'm going to be leading the opposition to make sure that we call them out and stop them from cutting Medicaid. And I think if all of you help me and call this out with your neighbors, I think we can stop them from cutting Medicaid. So let's get going on that. In Colorado, we have over 1 million people who are on Medicaid. And so you can see how important that is. Okay, one last thing, and then I'm going to go to Phil. The third C, citizen engagement. And we've been seeing this more and more. Look at it this morning. And we've been having rallies and all kinds of activities all around the country, protests. And this is so important for my colleagues in Congress to hear about because we do have elections in 2 years. And it's also important for Donald Trump to see this, that this is not what Americans want. Americans do not want Medicaid and Social Security cut. They don't want veterans to have a difficult time getting their benefits. They don't want these huge tariffs that are only going to raise the cost of food for Americans. And so when Americans do that, when they stand up, we win. And we've seen that time after time. And so it's not just you as citizens standing up, it's also me as your elected representative standing up with you to demonstrate all of these things every day. And I focus on doing this, as you can see, with every fiber of my being, and I just ask all of you to do that too. Because if we do those 3 C's, I know that we will win. So now, I'm going to introduce, after much hemming and hawing, I'm going to introduce our wonderful Attorney General Phil Weiser, who's going to give us an update about what's going on with the court cases.
Can we give a huge thank you to our Congresswoman Diana DeGette? Let me tell you something about Diana DeGette and our relationship. I was in law school 33 years ago. We went to the same law school. I didn't have the benefit of growing up in Colorado. I'm an adopted Coloradan. Thank you for adopting me. One of the people who put me up for adoption is Diana DeGette, who came to the law school and said, I am now a state representative in Colorado. And her message was, we need people who care about the rule of law, who believe in service in a nation of laws to serve in elected office. She carried that message. I came to Colorado, and I ultimately followed her advice, and I'm here as your Attorney General, following in the path of a great lawyer who believes in the Constitution and the rule of law. Thank you, Diana DeGette. Before I tell you a little bit about the what, let me start with the why. Why is this so deeply personal to me? My family is adopted Americans. My family came here as refugees. My grandmother, my grandfather both survived the Holocaust. My mom was actually born in a Nazi concentration camp almost 80 years ago to the day, April 13th, 1945. A week later, she was liberated by the U.S. Army. And my grandparents wanted to come to the United States of America because they believe this is a land that believes in liberty and justice for all. This is the land that believes, as Diana has stood for her whole career, the rule of law where everybody's treated fairly, no matter who you are. And the government operates according to the law, not to win. And right now, we are living in a moment testing the belief that I got from my grandparents and my mom about what this nation is built on. And the question I know everyone here is asking is, will this great democratic republic survive? And my answer is, hell yes, we will. Diana's point is exactly right. The reason we're going to survive, the third point she mentioned, is the courage of we the people. People ask, what is the fire break? And yes, the courts are important. I'm going to talk about that. But it's also important to have people showing up, using your voice, making sure that this commitment of our nation to live under the law is not simply an idea, but it's the reality that we fight for every day. I want to talk about some of what this work is, and it started on day one. It started with a fundamental assault on some of the most basic constitutional protections. If you are born here, you are an American citizen, period. I didn't know what I was going to get in the second Trump administration, but I had read Project 2025, and so I had an idea. And unfortunately, the movie is worse than the preview, as it turned out. Because on day one, they did this birthright citizenship ban in executive order, and we were ready for it. We went to court, and we've now got a preliminary injunction saying it can't be put into effect. And there have been other attacks on freedoms and of Colorado's sovereignty as a state. In Colorado, we've decided that if you need gender-affirming care, you have a right to get it. And I want to underscore the climate of fear that these executive orders have pushed. For a moment or two there, and I know for those affected by this, it felt like years. And it was excruciating. And I talked to parents who said, I can't believe what is happening to my kids. We went to court because we heard you, and with 3 other states, we stopped this order from going into effect, and we now have it again here in Colorado.
Thank you. So now we're going to come to the question section of our session, and wish me luck with my iPad here and my he's my tech support and my phone friend. But the first question that we have: what is being done to force the Trump administration to follow orders from the judiciary branch?
I don't know if this has one of those things where people vote on which question they want to be asked, but if they did, it does. Yeah, this I'm not surprised. This is number one. 130 people want this answer. There are more coming. Apparently, trust it. All right, we're gonna work on this technology. We'll see. So this is I could have told you this was going to be a top question. So this is important. First, I will call this modestly encouraging. In the cases we have thus far, if those keeping score at home, we're involved right now around 23 of them. All have the following feature. The Department of Justice lawyers have said We are following the law, seeking to follow these court orders, and as Chief Justice Roberts reminded the President, if you don't like a court order, you appeal it, you don't disregard it. So that is largely I'd say, in large, what is happening. I want to acknowledge how many scary statements have been made to the contrary, including threatening the impeachment of judges, including that Navy court orders would not be followed. Here's the way this will play out. If you have, I'm going to take an example of a case I didn't mention, but it's an important one. The Treasury Department giving DOJ access to sensitive personal information like Social Security numbers and bank accounts. And despite a court order that we won saying you can't do that, the Treasury Department still does it. The head of that department or the assistant secretary of that department have civil liability for civil contempt for violating a court order, which means, and we've already gotten motions to enforce, the next step would be contempt motions. That would mean we're asking for actual fines that they would have to pay personally, or that we put them in jail until they follow the law. And for those... Oh, good follow-up question. I was ready for that one. The next question is, wait a minute. What happens if U.S. Marshals aren't going to enforce those orders? Then the court can deputize state law enforcement to enforce federal law. I want to make a point, though, because you've got a good follow-up, and this is a painful point. If you're in Indiana or Ohio, where your state attorney general is not bringing these lawsuits, and your state law enforcement may not be committed to the rule of law, then some states will be less protected during this time. And you know what? They have recourse to in 2026 at the ballot box. Because those who don't follow the law, those who don't deliver for constituents are going to have to answer for it. And that is indeed the final answer to this question. If we see in states or in any other context people who are violating the law, who think they're above the law, ultimately, we the people will be heard.
So listen, that reminds me of my beautiful and wonderful friend who I miss every day, John Lewis, who said, never give up and never give in. And that's sort of our motto. The next question. So the next question is, how can you protect the federal government from the collateral damage of DOJ layoffs? So what we're doing is we're in conjunction with all of these lawsuits in Congress, we're demanding that all of these employees be reinstated. In addition, in the lawsuits which are being filed by the federal employees, they're seeking damages and reinstatement, and I believe they will be awarded these by the courts. The next question that's popping up on my screen is, what is being done to stop the genocide of Palestinians? How can you stop the flow of weapons to Israel? That's a really important question, and I think all of these questions are important. So let me just tell you my position on Israel, which has always been my position, and then my position on what's happening now. I've always been a supporter of Israel as an independent nation and homeland for the Jews. And the more of this we have, the less questions I can answer. So let me just, and I'll try to move along quickly, but give you a full answer. After the October 7th attack, I supported Israel's right to defend itself against Hamas, which is a terrorist group. Like all of you, though, I was horrified by the attacks in Gaza and by the loss of innocent Palestinian lives, kids. And I really was pushing hard in Congress for a ceasefire, and I was encouraged by recent efforts towards peace and the ceasefire. But now again, you've seen just in the recent days there have been more attacks on Gaza by Israel, and I'm deeply concerned about Netanyahu's resumed military operations with what I think seems like a goal of ethnic cleansing in the region. And so this, along with these violent Israeli settlers in the West Bank who are forcing Palestinians out of their home, it continues. This is not new. It's a pattern that the Netanyahu administration has had. And so Congress, so we are now moving in to a new appropriation cycle. And believe it or not, with all the chaos that we've been having, I'm going to continue to advocate for a two-state solution, which I always have. And I'm also going to be looking very skeptically about any weapons requests for Israel and how they are going to be used. So that's my view on that situation. The next question, it says at least 10, whoops. Okay, don't make it disappear from my screen. You don't need to convince most of the people in this town hall. Thank you. When was the last time you got on Fox News or other conservative media to make your case to the other side? Well, number one, anytime Fox News wants me on, I'll go on there. I've been on Fox News many times, and I'm not sorry to do it. They haven't called me lately. No, the reason they haven't called me lately is because I can actually debate. And I will say, when Phil was talking, I forgot to tell you that not only do I like coming to South High because it's a wonderful, wonderful, welcoming school, it's my alma mater. And also my mom went to South too. So Phil, you are now an honorary South High Raven as well. But I was this will really shock all of you, I was the head of the debate team when I was a student. And so they don't like to have me on Fox too much anymore. As a matter of fact, but I also believe, even now, that it's important to talk to the other side. And I have many Republican colleagues in Congress who I have worked with over the years on bipartisan legislation updating the way we do biomedical research and drug and device approval to get cures to people, because diseases, contrary to what Secretary Kennedy might think, diseases don't just affect one part or the other, they affect everybody. So I have a lot of Republican friends in Congress, and what I've been doing is I'm not giving them any grace right now. I got to tell you, when they say to me, well, like the other day, one of them said to me on the elevator, "How are you?" I said, "Well, not so good." And he goes, "Why?" I said, "Because they just cut 20% of the workforce at the FDA. How's that going to help us get safe food and new drugs in this country?" And they went, "Oh, so I am continuing to talk to people on the other side of the aisle, and I'm happy to go on to any right, but maybe now the right-wing websites will call me after today. I hope so. The next question: what is being done to bring back the people who are being held in El Salvador prison? What is to prevent them from sending anyone? These questions keep disappearing from my screen in the middle of me asking them. But that's the gist of the question. And let me tell you, this is to one of the points Phil was making, is the people who were sent to the El Salvador prisons were sent without any due process at all. No due process. They don't have any criminal charges against them. Even if they were members of a gang, in the U.S., you have to have a charge against you. You just don't go, "Oh, you've got a tattoo, so we're sending you to this horrible prison." Just yesterday, the judge ordered them to find a way to bring back these people, at least one of them from El Salvador.
This is a very important point, and just so that everyone's tracking, this is a moment to stand for due process. And Joe Rogan, who maybe will have Diana on, just the other day, said this is not a country where the government can take people off the streets without any process and ship them to an El Salvador prison. That doesn't happen in America. We can't let it happen. And that's the point. We are seeing something happening that we cannot allow to happen. We need to lift up our voices, and I want to say we've got a leader in Congress doing what we need. This shouldn't be a partisan issue. The country was founded on this principle.
The judge has ordered them to bring back, so now let's see how that's enforced. It needs to be enforced. They need to bring them back. Okay, now we also have the old-fashioned cards. So let me just, and they've, I don't know how they've separated them, but here's the first one, is what actions will Congress take to ensure our IRS tax information is not given to other agencies like HHS or ICE? And that's illegal. And there's been a lawsuit filed for that, and several judges have already stopped information from being shared, and I believe that all of this information is going to be stopped from being shared. So that's what's happening. Also, I forgot to introduce our ASL interpreter, Belinda Price. Thank you, Belinda. All right. Here's one. I didn't write this myself, but I'm going to say it. We want to thank Rep. DeGette for her leadership with the Special Diabetes Program and ask what we can do to advocate for science. It seems kind of pathetic when we have to ask what we can do to advocate for science in 2025. But in fact, we do need to advocate for science because that's what's going to get us the cures for these diseases. I'm the co-chair of the Special Diabetes, I'm the co-chair of the Diabetes Caucus in Congress, which is a bipartisan caucus, the largest caucus in the House, and we advocate for finding a cure for diabetes. We have a research program that I helped pass many years ago to give research to type 1 diabetes and also type 2 diabetes in American Indian populations. It's been wildly successful. We've had many, many breakthroughs in research. And this was one of those things that was included in the, I don't know if you cast your mind back, if you can, to November, December, when we were doing the budget bill. And we had a package, mostly of bipartisan healthcare bills, including the Special Diabetes Program, which we had negotiated to pass so that we could actually keep this research going. And Elon Musk and Donald Trump told the House Republicans, Mike Johnson, to take it out, and he did. And so we have been agitating ever since to get it back in. And I've been talking to my Republican colleagues every day, and what I said, it's this package, it's 51 separate bills, mostly healthcare bills that will help Americans. They stripped it right out. And so I keep saying to my Republican colleagues, you guys supported this, you voted for it, many of you sponsored these bills. When are you going to bring it up? And, well, I don't know. I can't understand it. And if they put it up on the floor, I told them this, if you put it up on the floor, every Democrat would vote for it, and I'll bet you most of the Republicans would too. So you're going to see now in the next week or two, I'm going to bring this issue to a head when we have a big committee bill markup and try to get it so this bill comes to the floor and passes so that Americans can get their health care. So, at least 10 CU international students have had visas revoked, and the State Department is scrutinizing social media content of students. What are you doing to advocate for these students and protect our freedom of speech and right to demonstrate? Once again, it's illegal. And it's disgusting what they are doing to stop people from exercising their First Amendment rights, whether they're students or anybody else. And if we have people, here comes Phil, so he has an answer too. But if we have people in Denver, the 1st Congressional District, if we have people who are being threatened, I need to know that. And you can go on my website, you can call me. We have already, in my Denver office, been able to stop investigations of several people. And so let us know if you are under this kind of pressure. We can stop it right now. The other problem we're having right now is people who are eligible for passports, who are being denied passports, and we can help with that too.
I got my own mic.
Oh, they gave him a mic.
They gave me a mic. This is getting back to what Diana said at the beginning. Fear is contagious, but so is courage. Hope is a discipline, and we all have a choice right now. Are we going to be intimidated in the face of a pressure campaign not to use our voice, not to support diversity, equity, inclusion, not to be our best authentic selves? Or are we going to stand on principle and fight for a core value of this republic, which is no one shall be denied the freedom of speech? Nobody. And in addition to this issue Diana spoke eloquently about, there is now a systematic attack on law firms based on who they represent and their political views. That is outrageous, which is why I joined with other state AGs calling it and calling on law firms to stand their ground. Because if we are afraid to speak, if we give up our right to speak, we give up being free citizens. We cannot allow that to happen in the United States of America.
The next question, the war in Ukraine has disappeared from the news cycle right now. Is there anything we can do to pressure the administration to restart assistance to the Ukrainian army with equipment and intelligence? Well, I've always been a strong supporter of Ukraine, not just because they're the victims of the hostile action by Russia, but also for strategic reasons, because they are really strategically located right there at the heart of Europe, or the beginning of Europe. And don't kid yourself, if Putin's going to go into Ukraine, Poland is next, Moldova, all of those countries around there, many of which I recently visited and talked to their very courageous, democratically elected governments. So some of us are really always raising up Ukraine anytime we can publicly. But also, when we do the budget, we're going to be fighting for Ukraine military assistance. Trump trying to cut off that aid to Ukraine, guess what? That's illegal. And the reason why that's illegal is because that's money that was already appropriated by the U.S. Congress, House and Senate, Democrats and Republicans, to go to Ukraine for aid. So that has been, there have been lawsuits filed for that to restart. I will say one more thing though, that the Biden administration, before they left office, sent as much money and weaponry out the door to Ukraine that they could. And so most of the money that was already appropriated to go has gone out there to Ukraine already. And so we're going to continue to fight for this. And I do believe that there's bipartisan support for Ukraine in both the House and the Senate, and I believe that this will continue. How are you in your role as chair of the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee working to fight the blatant disinformation coming from Kennedy and the dismantling of federal health services, including defunding research? I've got to say, folks, I've been in Congress a long time. I have never seen anything like this. And what's more, it's science. And so, you can't just say, oh, well, the measles vaccine doesn't work, just take cod liver oil, or just eat a healthy diet, because, as you saw, if you don't vaccinate kids, then kids will get measles and they will die, which is what has been happening. And so many of us have been calling out these very, very dangerous proposals for a long time. Last week, I didn't do Fox News last week, but I was on 2 panels for The Hill and for Politico. And I also did a long segment on Colorado Public Radio about the dangers that this misinformation and bad science is having, and also the impacts it's having on our researchers. And I'm going to be doing, you can watch for this week. There's going to be more. I don't want to announce it today, but there's going to be more action by me to shine a light on this. And by the way, these issues supporting science and biomedical research and vaccines, who knew? Can you imagine vaccines have become controversial now? But this has always been bipartisan in Congress. And so what I am doing is talking to my Republican colleagues about the dangers these face and what we need to do. And finally, the chair of the committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, said, well, I guess we'll have Kennedy's staff come over and brief our staffs. And I said, that's not enough. Kennedy needs to come over and brief me. And on my health subcommittee that I'm the senior Democrat, I have some really good Democrats, including AOC is now on the committee. We're picking up some fun. Why aren't the Dems overall having something time to enforce the public of what Trump has done and what the Dems have done? Now, part of it is we are fighting every day. I notice that frequently the mainstream press does not cover what we're doing. And so what I tell people is, if you want to know what I'm doing, the very best way you can do this, how many of you, let's have a show of hands, how many of you receive my newsletter? Okay. I would urge the rest of you to sign up for my newsletter. We send it out once a week when we're in session. It's like 1 page long with links, so if you're more interested in things, you can go more deeply into things. And it will talk about what I'm doing and what I'm seeing. Also, you can go on my website and see what I'm doing. And you can go on, we're on many social platforms. We are not on X anymore, so don't look for me on X. Blue Sky and Facebook and other ones, and so you can go on any of those to see what I'm doing and what the Democrats are doing. But the most important thing that we can do is we can stand united against these efforts. And you have seen the House Democrats standing united. We voted against the budget with the $4.2 trillion tax cuts for rich people. We voted against the continuing resolution, which had many giveaways to the Trump administration. And you're going to see us in the coming months continue to be united to stop this, but also to push the agenda for Americans.
If I could jump right in, the 23 Democratic state attorneys general are working together every day on the lawsuits I mentioned, taking a principled stand for law, for justice, and for people. And I'm inviting a number of my state AG colleagues to do a town hall on April 16th. And we'd love to have everyone, you guys have been an extraordinary audience, thank you so much. We'd love to have you come so I can have them hear from you, you hear from us, and then you can tell other people. I agree completely with Diana said. What we need now more than ever are engaged and informed citizens. I too am on a bunch of social media platforms, including X, still trying to talk to the other side, but
We'll talk about that later.
We'll talk about that later. And we'll post on the social media platforms this April 16th town hall with a number of my colleagues, and you can also see all the actions we're taking. And believe me, we are busy.
colleagues, and what are the results of that? Is there any hope of them doing the right things rather than towing the party line? Well, I think I told you I do interact with my Republican colleagues, and I think the most important thing I can do right now is let them know how what they're doing is impacting Americans. Because I'm surely they know it. You can see some of them did try to have town halls and didn't work out too well for them. But you know, I remember, I'll just tell you a story about this. Is one of the things that I do in Congress, I'm the chair of the Reproductive Freedom Caucus, formerly known as the Pro-Choice Caucus. And I've been fighting for abortion rights for my entire career, not just since I've been in Congress, but before that. And one day I was talking to one of my colleagues, and I was talking to him about one of my former staffers. And you know, federal employees, because they're under the Federal Employees Health Insurance Program, including my staffers at that time, they couldn't get access to abortions. And I had a former staffer, and he told me I could tell this story, but he and his wife were quite far along in a very, very wanted pregnancy. And it turned out, as sometimes happens, their baby had terrible fetal abnormalities and would not live once the birth happened. And so they made the very tough decision with their minister, with their doctor, and their family to terminate the pregnancy. And their insurance didn't cover it. And they had to find another doctor. Can you imagine under that circumstance? They had to find another doctor. They had to pay $8,000 for this, all while they were going through this horror. And I'm telling you this story because I told this story to one of my Republican colleagues who said he was for banning all abortions. So I told him this story because I don't think sometimes people talk about stuff like that. And he said to me, "Oh no, I don't mean that person." And I said, "The hell you don't, because you just voted for a bill that would deny care to that person." And so even if the conversations are difficult, and right now they surely are difficult, then I think you have to keep talking to everybody. And eventually they'll probably come around. I also think that, you know, they can all read like I can, and they surely can read polls, and they surely can read election results. And the election results of last Tuesday's special elections should give all of them pause when they think about what they're doing to enable billionaire Elon Musk and Donald Trump for what they're doing. Because in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race, the Democrat won that race by 9 points. Even though Elon Musk was giving away $1 million checks and showing up with a cheese on his head on stage. And I'll tell you, I believe we do have term limits for Congress is called elections every 2 years. And I believe, truly, I should have to come before you every 2 years and be rehired. And I will say that the moment I feel like I'm not serving you, or that I'm not serving the American people, I will retire. But right now, for example, with me, finally, after 28 years in Congress, it's all seniority, right? So I'm now the lead Democrat on healthcare policy in the House. I really don't think that it's my time to retire right now when I'm leading executive. Now, let's see. What can be done to support marginalized communities in schools with deep cuts to the Department of Education and the orders to end DEI programs by withholding Title I funding? Well, so first of all, as Phil told you, there are lawsuits pending because these cuts of the Department of Education and Title I funding are illegal, and I really am hoping that the funds will be reinstated soon because we need those in school districts like the Denver Public Schools and many schools around the state. And I do believe that, unless Congress decides to cut it, and as Phil said, we've been dealing with this issue in Congress for 40 years. They started trying under Reagan to cut the Department of Education, but it passes on a bipartisan basis because people really realize we need the help in Title I school districts and others. Here's a really important question that is coming up for all of us in Colorado. Is there a way to keep the National Park Service functional this summer? And so, they cut all, and of course it's illegal, but they cut all of the probationary workers for the National Park Service, which was most of the new workers who are the summer workers. And so the Colorado delegation is actually trying to work with the National Park Service to get people rehired. I think they need to rehire the permanent employees because they were fired illegally, but also to add in some temporary summer workers. And we should know more about that. We will put something about that on my website when we find out. Okay, this next question. I work for a small business, have a young daughter, and worry about how tariffs will raise costs for my family. Is there anything we can do to counter these measures? I think these tariffs are insane. And I really, the thing is, I don't know, you saw what the stock market did in the last 2 days, but in addition, if these carry forward, then the cost of goods and services for almost all Americans is only going to go up. And I will say, this is one thing that my Republican colleagues seem to understand. And so Trump just did this the other day. I'm waiting to see what's going to happen in Congress next week. We've already seen people on both sides of the aisle saying this is nuts and we've got to stop it. So I agree. I think it has to stop. Okay, next question. How will you protect Social Security and Medicare? Well, so Social Security and Medicare, these are programs that every American relies on. And they are the most popular safety net programs that we have in this country. Donald Trump has been smart enough to say that he's not going to cut Social Security or Medicare. And he also, P.S., said that he's not going to cut Medicaid. Medicaid's really important for seniors who are on long-term nursing care and need other types of health care. That we call them the dual eligibles. And so they say they're not going to go after those things. Elon Musk has not been so circumspect as Donald Trump has. And we've seen some of the things Elon Musk has said. I think after the last 75 days, we can say about Elon Musk, if he says something, believe it. So we are going to stand up very, very strongly to stop any cuts to Medicare and Social Security, as well as Medicaid. And what I'm going to need is for all of you to help me stand up for doing that. Put your stories out there, let us know, and let us know how this is wrong. But there's something else I'm concerned about, and you should be too, which is these backdoor cuts. And we're seeing this right here in my Denver office, where and you saw this too, where they're closing the Social Security offices. And so then they're saying if you need to apply for new Social Security benefits, or if you need to adjust the ones you have, then you have to go into the office, but they closed the office. And so if this happens to you, will you please call my Denver office so we can know that it's happening to people here? Also, veterans, because we have been hearing people have been having to wait 2.5 hours at the VA. And if we know this is going on, we can call them out on it, and we can call our congressional colleagues out on it, and we can make them reinstate these. And again, it's illegal that they're cutting this, and so we can make them reinstate it, and we need to preserve, not just preserve the benefits, but preserve the access for everybody in our community. So, next question, what are you doing to protect trans people? I'm one of the, hang on, wait a minute. Get really passionate about this issue, so I wanted to be sure I could talk. I'm one of the founders of the LGBTQ caucus in Congress. People don't necessarily know that about me. I was one of the founders, and to me, the trans rights are the canary in the coal mine for the human rights abuses of the country. And we, as a community, have to wrap our hearts and our legal protections around everybody who is trans in our community, as well as anybody else who needs that protection. And Phil said it beautifully in his comments. So yesterday, I don't think they would mind it if I said this. One of the things I've been telling my staff ever since Donald Trump started going after trans people and scapegoating them, the most vulnerable in our society, I said, I want to meet with leaders of the community to let them know that they are okay in Denver and they're okay with us. And so I met with some moms of some little kids who are trans. And they told me, these moms told me, one of them moved to Denver after researching many places because she lived in a red state. She wanted to come to a place that would be affirming. And they said that they felt safe here. And I was so proud to be a Denverite when she said that to me. And so what I'll say is, we are, trans rights are human rights. We're going to do everything we can to protect these kids' rights and everybody else in the LGBTQ community and every other American who wants to exercise their right to be themselves, because that's the fundamental core of what being an American is, to be able to be yourself. So I told these moms, we are here for you, and no one, and the schools are being great with their kids, so thank you very much, DPS and all the rest of the schools, and the community has been great, and we owe it to those folks in our community. And I told them, if anybody comes after you, you call me and I'll come stand next to you. I think I'll bring my attorney